Hi everyone, welcome to today's live. I hope you've had a great day. I'm doing the live a little bit later because I had other things to do this evening. However, I thought let me still do it, and then whoever needs to catch up later on will catch up later on. The video will remain up so you can re-watch it. You can also share it in your groups and share it with your family members, share it with your friends. Today's video is for both people in Great Britain and people in African countries. And this video was actually prompted by a dream I had, so I'm going to share it. And when I woke up from that dream, I began to remember, certain things that happened to do with this dream I had in relation to this dream I had. It's not directly related, but I was reminded of it. So it serves as an example for those who want an example. Okay, so the title of today's video is already on top of the video. So we're going to be talking about why it's important for parents in Great Britain and African countries to build businesses that last beyond them during this economic crisis. Okay, now if you know or you've been following the wealth transfer videos that I've been sharing and the content that I've been sharing around wealth transfer, and the economic crisis, you'd know that I've said it before, it's not going to get any better. Okay, it's not going to get any better. However, in the midst of everything that is currently happening, we as God's people, we are in the middle of a wealth transfer. Okay, we are in the middle of a wealth transfer where wealth is being passed on over to us. Okay, and this wealth transfer is not just for us, but it's also for our children. This wealth is not just for us, but also for our children. And the strategies that God is giving us in areas of investment and in areas of business building is not just for us to build for ourselves as adults, but for those of us who are parents like myself. I'm a mum of two. Shout out to Sarah Ikuawood and David Ohene Frimpong, my children. They're my son and my daughter, or my daughter and my son, in that order. It's for us to be able to prepare our children for their adult years as well. Whether they are little, whether you're just pregnant, whether they are in their teenage years, whether they are already adults, like, you need to be building with them in mind. Okay, you need to be building your business with them in mind, and that is where inheritance comes in. Okay, but I'm gonna talk about it in a separate video about the legalities of leaving an inheritance in terms of business. Okay, of a business, a company, for your children or your child. Okay, both in United Kingdom and in African countries, one of them being my country, which is Uganda. Okay, so a few days ago, the day before yesterday, I went to bed, sleeping, everything. Then I have a dream type vision. Okay, so I have this dream, and in this dream, I see myself in a place. It was like a building, but it was like a building with many rooms, so many rooms, so many houses, right? Like rooms opened up, and so many, no, not rooms, so many, they look like rooms, but also like a compound, like homes, people's homes, right? And so many of them like differently. So I'll go in here, then I'll move from there, I'll go to another place, then I'll move from there, then I'll go to another place, then I'll move from there, and then I'll go to another place. And then there was like roads, like stairs, and I'd go on the stairs, and then I'd go to another place, and then there'll be like homes with compounds. And then eventually it changes, and I'm in another compound, but this compound had a family home, and then right in front of the family home was a shop owned by that family. And then there was, the gap, like the compound, and on the compound was a mom, and people had gathered around this woman, okay, and her children were in the shop, but people, had gathered around her and were asking like, is she okay, is she okay, is she okay? And before I share that part, okay, let me share that part. So everybody was asking, and then I touched the woman. Literally, I knew that she was dead. So I said, she's dead. And then I went back to where I came from in the dream, and it was in this, so it was a black family where I just left. So I knew it represented Africa, because that's how God speaks to me. The condition, everything looks like Africa. I know an African country when I see one, okay, especially in dreams. So I knew I was somewhere in Africa, and I knew that I was in my country in Africa, because the woman was wearing a gomsi, which is a traditional outfit for women in my country, whether you're from northern Uganda or from the capital, the eastern part, the eastern or the western part of Uganda, we wear gomsi, okay? So I knew that I was in Uganda in the dream. Then when I went back into where I had come from originally, in the first place, I was literally seeing white people, white women, white men, young girls, young white girls, and this man was just like over them, like overseeing them, and I'll just walk, and the condition of where they were living was horrendous. It was horrible. It was horrible. Like, imagine the repairs weren't done. Like, it was just a horrible condition, and you could see that they were not happy. And this man who was over them, who was supposed to be the adult over them, was just like a stern face, somebody that you can't go to. You can go and ask them for help, but they won't help you at all. They won't help you at all. And it was someone in authority, and you ask them for help, but that man wouldn't help you. He wouldn't respond to you. He would just like a way to maneuver himself out of the situation of responding to you. And I kept asking him, where is Kampala? Where is Kampala? Where is Kampala? Like I kept asking him, where is Kampala? Where is Kampala? In the dream, where is Kampala? And he just find a way to avoid answering me where Kampala is. And then I'm walking around, going through the tunnels, through each house, through each place, staircase, and trying to find where Kampala is. Right? But all I'm seeing is these English people. And none of them, okay, like I'm seeing their condition, and I'm grieved by their situation. However, I just knew, like, okay, Kampala was like the focus in the dream. And then I turned, and there was this section of the build. Finally, I found where Kampala is, like the representation. And it was massive, like a massive room, a massive place. But one boy was there, he came to me. And when he came to me, I asked, he was about a 10-year-old, about this tall. And I asked him, why, what's wrong, like, why are you here, what's wrong? And he said, well, my parents are dead. And I said, oh, I'm really, really sorry. I'm sorry that your parents are dead. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. And I woke up. And when I woke up, I was going to dismiss that dream. I was going to dismiss it. But I pondered upon it, and then I asked God. I said to God, why did you show me this dream? And why are you showing me Kampala? And I remembered a few days before that dream, God told me to continue sharing on investments in Africa, for African countries. So I knew straight away, like, he wanted me to speak on certain things. And then I was reminded now of a situation that I had come across, like, over 6-7 years ago. And I was younger then. And in the UK, if you live in the UK or you know about the UK, you know that there are homeless people. Okay, so if you didn't know, now you know there are homeless people. There are people who are poor. There are people who are homeless for various reasons. So many reasons why people become homeless and poor in the UK. One of which is because of drug issues and broken relationships, broken families, and also bereavement, especially with teenage children, with teenagers and young adults. Okay, so I was going into town, and all of a sudden I met this young girl sitting on the corner of the main road, and normally my charity, one of the assignments that I've been given by God is to provide for the poor. And So I was touched by her situation. So I went up to her and I asked her, what's going on? Why are you homeless? How come you're sitting here? And I gave her a few things that I had, like snacks and all of that I had, gave it to her. And then she explained to me, oh, my grandma just died. And I said, well, okay. Okay, I'm really sorry about that. So why are you homeless all of a sudden? She was like, oh, the home, she was the one who was paying the rent and everything. And I don't know how to pay rent and I don't know how to do all that. And the house has been taken from me. And I was like, oh, I'm really sorry about that. And then I said to her, can I pray for you? Because I believe that God is able to touch people in their situations and make a turnaround in their life. So she said yes, so I prayed for her. Gladly, a few months later, I saw her again. And this time she had a home and everything was okay with her. Okay? But it brings me to this place of the reason why it's so important for us as parents to build and invest in assets that goes beyond us. That goes beyond us, because you see, like when you, in this country, in Great Britain, when you die as a parent, and if you're a single parent, for example, and you die, and you have young adults or little children, if they're little, they're put into foster care, where the government looks after, like pays people to look after them. And if they're like teenagers, they're put into children's home. They're put into children's home, and or even older, if they're like too old if they can't find a foster home, they'll put them into children's home, and the government will be responsible for looking after them if you don't have extended families to look after them. Okay. However, the government the people who the government pays to look after these children don't always have their best intentions. They don't always have their care in mind. They don't care about them, because these people are paid to look after them. It's like staff, it's like a job. And so they don't care for the well-being beyond the books. They don't really care. They'll just do what the book says, the bare minimum, and they don't care. So you find that these children, yes, they're given material stuff, but their emotional well-being, their upkeep, everything about them, everything else would be neglected. And then these children, when they get to the age of 21, they are released out of the system. The system no longer cares about them because they are now deemed as adults. So if they don't have assets, they don't have a life that is already built up for them, guess what? They are set up to fail. Because they'll just be put in the job system if they were derailed and they weren't responsible enough to work and all of this, because the government was providing everything for them, a roof over their head. They weren't trained to pay bills and all of that. They weren't trained to look for jobs or anything like that. They end up living a miserable life. And that is why God wants us to not just to build, but to leave assets, legally leave assets. Because if you die and you had a business, but you don't put it in a will, you don't put it in a trust for your children, guess what? The state, the government will take it. The government will claim it and will not give that asset to your children, whether it's a real estate business that you built. They will not give that asset to your children. They will not give that business to your children or your child. Or if you had a business like one behind me now, right, a product business, when a company, because my business is registered companies, they're two in one, brought into one, registered companies. If they're not in my will and in a trust fund for my son and my daughter, guess what? The state will take the company, will sell everything from it, liquidate everything, liquidate all the funds, take all the funds, take all the assets from it, and will not give anything to my children. Or family members will come and they'll claim it. Family members will come and they'll claim it. And in African settings, when I don't know about the UK's. Well, I know a little bit how the UK functions. If they're already in family members will come. In the UK, they do the same thing. They'll come, they'll take it. Certain things, like if I was to pass away, this house, I can't pass it on to my children. It's not inherited. The housing association will come and take it. My children will just be, well, my daughter lives with her dad, but they'll be taken. If family members can't look after them, they'll put them into care. They'll take everything. They'll liquidate everything. They liquidate everything and take everything, all my assets. If I didn't put it in a will and a trust for them, it will be taken. Family members, they'll take it. They'll claim everything. They won't look after your children the way they're supposed to look after your children with those assets. They fight over it. They fight over it, and you end up your children end up losing everything, and they end up poor. If they are not trained, if they don't have the ability to build for themselves yet, and even if they're working, they lose everything. So that is why it's so important. It's so important that you don't just build, but put the necessary documents in place. If you're a couple, the same thing. You should do the same thing. Put your assets into your will, individual will, and then into a trust for your children. So if anything happens to both of you, your children will be looked after, and your children would have something to inherit, so that they're not suffering. Because like I said, it's going to only get worse. The economy of nations is only going to get worse. The economy of different countries around the world, globally, is only going to get worse. But those who are prepared, whether you know God or you don't know God, if you are prepared, you will thrive. If you are financially prepared, you and your children will thrive. But if you are not prepared financially, you are going to suffer. Your children equally will suffer if you are not prepared. If you are not prepared, your children will suffer. And the state and the government now, okay, what I've been seeing, what God has been showing me, those who depend on governments, they're going to be in bondage. You're going to be treated like slave. you are going to be treated like slaves. I was telling one of my friends that the cost of living crisis, people were being being given money, and the last one was over £900. People were being given money, like working families were being given money. That has stopped. That has now stopped. Now they're just funding the elderly people. Literally, the rug is being pulled from under people's feet. They're talking about scrapping national insurance numbers. That basically is the government trying to scam people out of their pensions. Okay, so people like myself, we may not even have a pension. So if you're now an elderly parent with no assets, no business that you've built, nothing, your savings may end up running out because the inflation is going to be a lot. It's going to be so much. Okay, if you don't have passive income that is bringing you money daily, like a business, like the one behind me, guess what? You won't be able to make it. Your children will suffer, and God forbid, if you pass away, your children, and you leave nothing for your children, and even if you leave something for your children, but you don't leave it in a legal manner, guess what? They will suffer. Even if it's the government looking after them, the government, like I've already explained to you, the government does the bare minimum. The people who look after them, who are paid by the government, they don't do a lot for these children. I mean, I was in a foster care, and children young children, be below their teenage years, they'll leave the foster home, go out for the day. By 10, 11, 12, they're not back. Sometimes they'll sleep out in another place. You call the police as a foster carer. The police doesn't do anything. They'll say, you just go to bed, they'll come back. They don't know where the whereabouts of these children, these young people. They don't know. They don't know where they are. They don't know who they're with. They don't know what they've gotten up to. They don't know. Some of these people who are meant to be staff end up also abusing these children and these young people. Then when they leave these systems, they go into the world not knowing how to cope, and it's a repetitive cycle. And in African countries, Uganda being one of them, if you leave an asset but you don't leave it legally, your family members who are meant to be guardians over your children, when you pass away, because you think that they'll do right by your children, guess what? They'll fight over those assets, they'll claim it, they'll sell those assets, or they'll squander the assets and everything, and your children won't get anything. Your children will go back to zero, nothing, having nothing. But if you leave it legally, they are able to go into court and fight for that and have that given to them. And whoever is a guardian over them will not have the right to sell the asset, will not have the right to squander the assets, but it will be for your children. So it's very important that you do that. It's very important that you start building businesses with your children in mind. Build it with your children in mind. That's why you shouldn't just do a cash in hand type of business that is not registered, that you just do cash in hand, so if anything happens to you, your children wouldn't even know what to do. They'll have nothing to claim. They'll have nothing at all to claim. But if you do a properly registered business, you have, assets within your business. You have things that your children can sell within the business. You have, resources that they can still continue building the business even when you're not there, and still be gaining income from it, you know, you would have left them something really great and something that would help them throughout their life if they decide not to sell and they look after it. And that's another thing. That's why it's also important that you begin to teach your children how to run that business. If it's a business like this one behind me, teach them how to sell, teach them how to use the platforms, teach them how to buy their stock, teach them how to store their stock, teach them how to use the money that they get from the business, teach them how to reinvest that money so that they're not losing capital and they're always looking for capital outside of the business. And they're not borrowing loan after loan just to keep the business afloat. You know, if it's real estate, teach them how to manage the property. Teach them the laws around it. Teach them how to collect rent. Teach them how to refurbish, who to go to refurbish the apartments or the houses, you know, or the shops for rent. Teach them how to do all that. You know, and so that they'll know, so that even if they hire other people, they'll know how to manage those people. They'll know when they're being scammed. They'll know when people are messing with the business and not doing it right, and they'll be able to rectify it. They'll be able to bring in the right professionals to help them to continue that business and not just sell it off because they're afraid, they don't know how to run the business, and they're afraid that they'll end up losing bankrupting the business and then losing it eventually with no assets left, because not having any income left coming into it either, and the assets are no longer, you know, of use. And so so it's very important that you do that. Don't just leave it for them. As they get growing up, let them see you, let them learn. As they get old, when they become older, if they're already old enough, like they're in their teenage years, show them. If they're like in their 20s upwards, show them the documents, show them, talk to them, let them know what you're leaving behind for them. Let them know, like, so that they'll know what they're entitled to and what you're leaving behind for them, so that they're not scammed out of it. And that brings us to the end of this video. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about how to legally leave your business to your children. Okay, so that being in a will and in a trust. Okay, so that it prevents family members and the state from claiming the asset and taking it away from your children. And we'll talk about inheritance tax and all of that in the next video after that. However, have a good night, and I shall see you all in the next video. Bye.